A shadow falls across the screen, barely perceptible at first. My voice, a low rumble, begins. There's a chill in the air tonight, a stillness that speaks of things unseen. The veil is thin and whispers echo from the other side. Tonight we delve into the shadows to uncover tales that will haunt your dreams. Stories whispered in hushed tones, passed down through generations. Each one a chilling reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried. The shadow deepens, consuming the screen as the title card flashes. 3 real ghost stories, shadows and secrets. Our journey begins at the edge of town, where a crumbling Victorian mansion stands sentinel against the encroaching forest. This, my friends, is Blackwood Manor, a place steeped in tragic history and whispered to be haunted by those who met their end within its decaying walls. Built in the late 1800s, Blackwood Manor was once home to the wealthy Eldridge family, but their fortune, it seemed, was intertwined with misfortune. The patriarch, Jonathan Eldridge, made his riches in the shipping trade, but whispers followed him of dark dealings and ruthless ambition. Local legend claims that Eldridge's wife Eleanor fell deathly ill shortly after moving into the manor. Some say it was consumption, others whisper of a broken heart, unable to bear the darkness that clung to her husband. Eleanor's spirit, they say, never left Blackwood. She wanders the halls, a spectral figure in a flowing white gown, her mournful cries echoing through the empty rooms. But Eleanor isn't alone in her torment. Years after his wife's passing, Jonathan Eldridge himself met a grim end. Found dead in his study, a single gunshot wound to the head. The official story declared it a suicide, but rumours persisted of foul play, of a business deal gone wrong, and a life claimed in revenge. Whatever the truth, Jonathan's presence is said to be just as palpable as Eleanor's. People have reported seeing the shadowy silhouette of a man in the study window, his eyes burning with a cold, malevolent light. Over the years, Blackwood Manor has passed through many hands, each owner driven out by the unsettling events that plague the property. Footsteps in the dead of night, disembodied whispers, and the feeling of being watched, of icy fingers trailing down your spine. The current owner refuses to even set foot inside, leaving the manor to rot under the watchful eyes of the townsfolk who give it a wide berth, especially after dark. We were fortunate enough, or perhaps unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, to gain access to Blackwood Manor. Our team, armed with cameras and a healthy dose of apprehension, stepped across the threshold and into the oppressive atmosphere of the house. The air was heavy with the scent of decay. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the boarded-up windows, and an unnatural stillness hung over everything, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards beneath our feet. We set up our equipment in the parlour, a grand room with faded grandeur and a fireplace that had long since gone cold. The temperature dropped noticeably as we began our investigation, and a shiver ran down my spine. This place had a presence, an undeniable energy that sent a prickle of unease across my skin. Our next tale takes us to the outskirts of a forgotten town, where a skeletal structure claws at the sky, a monument to suffering and despair. This is Mercy Hospital, though the only mercy found within its walls these days is the sweet release of death. Built in the early 1900s, Mercy Hospital was once a beacon of hope, a place where the sick and injured came seeking solace and a chance at recovery. But over the years, the hospital gained a sinister reputation, whispered amongst the townsfolk as a place where more souls departed than ever walked out alive. The stories began subtly at first, whispers of patients claiming to see shadowy figures lurking in the hallways, or hearing their names whispered from empty rooms. Nurses reported feeling cold spots in certain areas of the hospital, and medical equipment would malfunction without explanation. But as the years wore on, the occurrences grew more frequent, more intense. One of the most well-known stories involves a young nurse named Sarah who worked the night shift in the hospital's intensive care unit. One particularly busy evening, Sarah was tending to a patient when she heard a faint cry for help coming from an empty room down the hall. Thinking it was another patient in need, Sarah rushed to the room, only to find it completely empty. As she turned to leave, she felt a cold breath on her neck and heard a raspy voice whisper her name. Sarah spun around, but there was no one there. Shaken but undeterred, Sarah returned to her duties. However, the strange occurrences continued throughout the night. Doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered erratically, and the cries for help echoed through the hallways, always seeming to come from just beyond her reach. By the time her shift ended, Sarah was a nervous wreck, convinced that something sinister was stalking her within the hospital walls. Eventually, Mercy Hospital was shut down, deemed too dangerous and too haunted to remain operational. The building has stood abandoned ever since, a decaying reminder of the horrors that transpired within its walls. But despite its derelict state, people still report seeing lights flickering in the windows at night and hearing the faint echoes of screams and moans carried on the wind. Our team investigated Mercy Hospital on a cold, overcast day. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the silence was broken only by the sound of our own footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. As we made our way through the hospital, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were following our every move. We set up our equipment in the former intensive care unit, where Nurse Sarah had experienced her terrifying encounter. The air in the room was heavy with a palpable sense of dread, and the temperature dropped noticeably as we began our investigation. Our final destination tonight is not for the faint of heart. We stand at the rusted gates of Potter's Field, a forgotten cemetery swallowed by the relentless embrace of nature. Here, amongst the toppled headstones and overgrown pathways, lies a darkness that whispers of the other side, a place where the veil between the living and the dead is as thin as a cobweb. Potter's Field is a pauper's graveyard, a final resting place for the unknown, the unwanted, the forgotten souls lost to time. It's a place where unmarked graves lie shrouded in shadow, and the weight of countless sorrows seeps into the very earth itself. Locals will tell you that Potter's Field is cursed, haunted by the restless spirits of those laid to rest without ceremony, without love, without even a name to mark their existence. Stories abound of strange lights dancing amongst the headstones, disembodied whispers carried on the wind, and a feeling of overwhelming dread that washes over anyone foolish enough to venture within its confines after dark. One particular grave, marked only by a simple iron cross twisted with age, is said to be the epicenter of the cemetery's unsettling activity. Legend has it that a young woman named Mary is buried there, a woman who met a tragic end under a shroud of mystery. Some say she was murdered, her body left to rot in the woods before being discovered and buried in this desolate place. Others claim she took her own life, driven to despair by a broken heart or a life of hardship. Whatever the truth of Mary's demise, her spirit is said to wander Potter's Field, searching for something she lost in life, or perhaps seeking solace in death. Those who dare to visit her grave often report feeling a cold hand brush against theirs, or hearing her mournful cries echoing through the stillness of the night. One chilling account tells of a group of teenagers who, fueled by teenage bravado and morbid curiosity, decided to spend a night in Potter's Field, daring each other to face the darkness and the whispers of the dead. They gathered around Mary's grave, their laughter and taunts echoing through the stillness, until suddenly the air grew cold, and a heavy silence descended upon them. One of the teenagers, a boy named Michael, claimed to see a figure standing behind them, a woman in a white dress, her face obscured by the shadows. He tried to warn his friends, but his words caught in his throat, his voice reduced to a strangled gasp. The figure glided towards them, and as it drew closer, the teenagers swore they could hear the mournful sobs of a woman in despair. Panic seized the group, and they scrambled to their feet, fleeing through the darkness, their laughter replaced by screams of terror. They didn't stop running until they reached the safety of the cemetery gates, their hearts pounding in their chests, the image of the woman in white seared into their minds. Our team approached Potter's Field with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The cemetery was even more unsettling in person, the air heavy with the weight of sorrow, and the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant caw of a crow. We made our way through the overgrown pathways, our footsteps echoing on the cobblestones, our eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. As we reached Mary's grave, the air grew noticeably colder, and a feeling of unease settled over us. We set up our equipment, our movements slow and deliberate, our voices hushed in respect for the dead. As we began our investigation, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were upon us, judging our every move. We captured several EVPs, including the distinct sound of a woman's voice whispering, "Help me," and our EMF detectors spiked erratically, indicating fluctuations in the electromagnetic field. Our cameras captured a strange mist forming near Mary's grave, and we could feel the hair on the back of our necks stand on end. As the night wore on, the activity intensified. We heard footsteps behind us, though when we turned there was no one there. The screen fades to black, the only sound the echo of a beating heart, slow and steady. My voice, a whisper now, seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. These are just a few of the countless stories that whisper to us from the shadows. Stories that remind us that we are not alone, that the veil between this world and the next is thin, fragile. Sleep tight, and remember the next story could be yours. The heartbeat slows, fades, leaving only an empty silence.